My wife cheated with her boss, Mark, during our 2-year divorce, secretly transferring $250, $0 from our joint account to his company, only for me to find out she's been planning to claim our house and savings of $500, $0 in court. Did I miss the signs? I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing this down, but here we are. It all started with little things, things I brushed off at first because I didn't want to believe they could be true. But then the signs got louder, more obvious, and I finally had to face the brutal truth. My wife Lisa was cheating on me. And not just with some random guy, but with her boss, Mark. The craziest part. I found out she'd been secretly transferring $250,000 from our joint account into his company. Yeah, I know. How the hell did I miss all of that? Lisa and I had been together for about 7 years. We got married 3 years ago, and honestly, things seemed fine. She was bitchy sometimes, sure, but I figured that was just her personality. She was always quick to lie about little things, like she'd say she was working late, but then I'd catch her texting someone, or her phone would mysteriously be on silent when I tried to call. Still, I trusted her. Or maybe I just didn't want to see the signs. At first, I thought maybe I was overthinking it. She'd start acting a little distant, cancel plans last minute, but she'd always have some excuse. Work stress, family issues, whatever. She tell me I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. But then I noticed her phone disappearing for hours, sometimes late at night. She'd lock it, hide it in her purse, or keep it in her car. That was odd, but I brushed it off, thinking she was just being protective or maybe hiding some surprise for me. Then came the big one. A few weeks ago, I decided to check our bank account out of curiosity. I'd been feeling uneasy about some of her behaviors lately. I logged in, and my stomach dropped. There was a transfer of $250, $0 going somewhere, an account I'd never seen before. I looked closer. It was going from our joint account into a company called Mark's Enterprises. I didn't even know she had a company. I started digging. I found out she opened that account under a fake name, probably to hide what she was doing. The transfer was made in small chunks over several months, but it all added up to $250,000. And the worst part, she told me she was saving for a house, that she wanted to surprise me with a new place. But now I see she was funneling the money into Mark's business, probably paying for her affair. I was furious. My mind raced. I wondered how long she'd been planning this, how many lies she told me, how many nights she spent with him behind my back. It was like a gut punch. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and sick. I still remember the feeling of holding that bank statement, realizing that everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was a lie. I wanted to confront her right then, but I knew I had to be smart. I needed to gather more evidence first, see how deep this rabbit hole went. I started paying closer attention to her routines. She'd leave her phone around less often, and when she did, it was always locked. She'd get calls late at night and rush to answer them in the bathroom or somewhere private. I'd hear her whispering, sometimes laughing, definitely not the kind of calls you have when you're just checking in with a friend. And then I caught her, by accident, when I looked over her shoulder while she was texting. It was a message from Mark, just a simple "can't wait to see you tonight," with a heart emoji. That was it. That was the moment I knew for sure. I couldn't believe it. My wife, my partner, was sneaking around with her boss, and I had been completely blind to it. All those little signs, the late nights, the secrecy, the money, none of it was coincidence. It was all part of her plan. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. My mind spun with questions. How long has this been going on? How did I miss all the signs? Was I just too blind or too naive? The worst part, I knew I had to confront her. I needed to hear her lie, her deny, her spin her stories. Because I knew Lisa, she was good at lying. She'd always had a way of twisting things to make herself look innocent, even when she was guilty as hell. But I wasn't going to be fooled again, not after this. Not after discovering that she'd been secretly stealing from us, planning to leave me for Mark, and probably thinking she could get away with it all. I've never felt so betrayed in my life. The trust I had in her shattered in an instant. And now I'm sitting here trying to process what comes next. Do I fight for this marriage? Do I walk away? Or do I do something else entirely? Honestly, I'm still torn. But one thing is clear. My life has changed forever, and I'm not going to let her get away with it. After I found out about the transfer and saw that message from Mark, everything else felt like a blur. I couldn't sleep that night, my mind racing, heart pounding. I kept replaying every moment we'd had over the years, trying to find the signs I'd missed, but honestly, it was like trying to see through fog. I kept asking myself, did I miss the signs? Was I just blind to everything? I mean, she was bitchy, yes, but she always had her excuses ready. She'd tell me she was stressed, tired, or just not in the mood. Now I realize it was all part of her game to hide what she was really up to. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a sinking feeling in my gut. I knew I couldn't just sit around anymore. I had to confront her. I waited until she left for work, then I went through her phone and her laptop, everything I could find. I needed proof, something concrete to back up what I already knew. Her messages with Mark, the bank statements, emails, anything that would confirm the extent of her betrayal. When she got home that evening, I was already waiting in the living room. She looked surprised, maybe even guilty, but she tried to brush it off with her usual bitchy attitude. "What's wrong, Tommy? You look like you've seen a ghost." Her voice was sharp, but I kept my cool. I pulled out the bank statements, laid them on the table, and watched her face drain of color. "Care to explain this?" I asked, voice cold but controlled. $250, $0 transferred into some company. Called Mark's Enterprises. Care to tell me what's going on? Her eyes darted around, and for a second she looked genuinely caught off guard. Then she scoffed, "Oh, it's just some investment. You know, I've been thinking about starting my own business and I wanted to get some advice from Mark. You know how he is always pushing me to do better." I almost laughed. That was her go-to excuse, just some investment, she'd say. But I knew better now. I'd seen the messages, the emails, the transfer receipts. It was all her plan with Mark, and clearly she'd been hiding it for months. I felt my blood boil. How could she lie so easily? How could she think I wouldn't find out? I pressed her further. "Really? Because I also found out you've been sneaking around with Mark for months. I saw the messages. I saw the late-night calls. And I found out about the money transfer. How long has this been going on?" Her face twisted into that same bitchy smirk she always used when she was trying to manipulate someone. "Tommy, you're overreacting. You're just jealous because Mark is successful and I've been trying to get some guidance from him. It's not what you think. We're just friends and I've been stressed lately, that's all." I couldn't believe it. Her lying was so blatant, so obvious, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost, but the anger took over. "You're full of shit, Lisa. I know you've been lying from the start. You've been planning this, haven't you? Planning to leave with Mark, taking everything from us." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, you're paranoid. You always think the worst. Maybe if you weren't so insecure, you'd see that I'm trying to build something for us. But I guess I was wrong. Guess I should just take everything and leave, right?" That's when I snapped. All the frustration, all the pain, it came pouring out. I told her I'd had enough, that I knew about the affair, about the money, about her lies. I told her I didn't want to be married to someone who could do this to me, to us. I was furious, but I kept my voice steady, trying not to lose control. She looked furious too, like I'd just ruined her plans. "You don't get to tell me what to do, Tommy. I'll do whatever I want. You're just a boring, insecure guy who can't keep up with a real woman." That was it. I'd been humiliated enough. I told her I was done, that I'd be filing for divorce the next day. I had to get out of that house, get some space to breathe, to think. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I also knew I couldn't stay married to a woman who lied, cheated, and stole from us. As I packed my bag that night, I felt a strange mix of relief and despair. Part of me wanted to fight to make her pay, but another part just wanted to walk away and forget it all. But I couldn't ignore the money, the lies, the betrayal. It was too much. I realized that I'd been played, used, and manipulated for years. And now I had to decide what to do next. The next day I went straight to a lawyer. I needed to know my rights, what I was entitled to, and how to protect what was mine. She had already started planning her move. She'd mentioned claiming the house and our savings of $500,000 in court. I knew she was trying to steal everything, thinking I wouldn't fight back. But I was done being the victim. I was going to fight for what was ours, for my dignity, and for some kind of justice. Honestly, I don't know what the future holds now. Part of me wants revenge, wants her to feel just a fraction of what I felt when I found out. But another part knows I need to stay calm, focus on the legal battle ahead. All I know is that I'll never trust her again, and I'll make damn sure she doesn't get away with this without consequences. After I left her that night, everything started moving fast. I contacted a lawyer first thing in the morning. I needed to understand exactly what I was up against, what she could legally claim, what I was entitled to, and how to protect myself from her sneaky plans. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Karen, listened carefully and told me that Lisa's move to claim the house and the savings was probably part of a premeditated strategy. She was planning to take everything she could, expecting I'd be too. To fight back, Karen explained that since the house was in both our names, she might have a good case, especially if she could prove she'd been planning to claim it all along. The savings, though, were a different story. Given that they were from a joint account, I had a strong case to hold on to what was ours. But the fact that Lisa had secretly transferred so much money into Mark's company was a huge red flag. That kind of financial manipulation could be considered fraud, and I was determined to dig deeper. Over the next few days, I started gathering evidence. I pulled bank statements, emails, text messages, and anything that could back up my claim. I also hired a private investigator, something I never thought I'd do, but I knew I needed to see the full picture. I wanted to know how long Lisa and Mark had been involved, how much money she'd actually transferred, and what her plans were. The investigator found some eye-opening stuff. Messages from Lisa to Mark, planning secret meetings, discussing their future, and even more transfers of money into Mark's company. It was clear she'd been orchestrating this for months, maybe even over a year. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, pretending everything was fine. She'd call me paranoid, accuse me of snooping, and try to make me feel guilty for accusing her of something she didn't do. But I wasn't buying her lies anymore. I saw through her. Every time she lied, I felt a little more anger, a little more resolve to take her down. I decided I had to confront her again, but this time with all the evidence in hand. When she came home from work that day, I was ready. I sat her down and laid everything out: the bank transfers, the messages, the fact that I knew about her affair with Mark. Her face twisted into that bitchy smirk again. She tried to deny everything, saying I was jealous, insecure, and imagining things. She spun some new lie about how I was accusing her of being unfaithful just because I was insecure about my own shortcomings. I told her that her lies didn't hold up anymore, that I had proof, and I wasn't going to pretend everything was okay. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, fake tears streaming down her face, saying she was sorry, that she didn't mean for any of this to happen, and that she loved me. But I wasn't buying it. I told her that love doesn't involve secretly transferring hundreds of thousands of dollars, sneaking around with her boss, and lying to my face for months. I told her I was done with her manipulations, that I was going to fight for what's ours, and that I was going to make sure she paid for her betrayal. That night, I stayed up late, planning my next moves. I knew I had to get a court order to freeze her accounts, stop her from claiming the house, and secure my share of the savings. I also knew I had to be prepared for her to throw everything she had at me: lawyers, false accusations, maybe even trying to turn the kids against me. But I was ready. I was more than done with her lies and betrayal. I also started thinking about what I really wanted. I realized I wasn't just fighting for money or the house. I was fighting to reclaim my dignity, to prove that I wouldn't be played for a fool anymore. I'd been a naive guy, trusting her blindly, but now I saw her for what she really was: a manipulative, selfish woman who'd do anything to get what she wanted. And I was done being her victim. The hardest part was the emotional toll. I kept asking myself how I could have missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind. I felt like I'd lost a part of myself, and I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust again. But deep down, I knew I had to stay strong for myself, for my kids, and for whatever future I could still salvage. I couldn't let her steal everything from me, not just the money but my sense of self. Now I'm just waiting for the legal process to kick in. I've filed for a restraining order, and the court is set to hear my case soon. I know she's going to fight tooth and nail to keep what she thinks is hers, but I'm not backing down. I've got enough evidence to make her regret ever crossing me. I guess the main lesson I've learned is that betrayal comes in many forms, and sometimes you don't see it coming until it's too late. But when you do, you have to be prepared to fight, and that's exactly what I plan to do. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal appointments, late-night strategizing, and a growing sense of dread that Lisa might do something even nastier to try and get her way. I kept pushing forward, gathering more evidence, talking to my lawyer every few hours, and trying to stay grounded amid the chaos. I knew she was probably planning her next move. She always had a way of turning things around, twisting the narrative to make herself look innocent or the victim. But I refused to let her manipulate me anymore. One thing I learned quickly was that Lisa wasn't above playing dirty. She started spreading rumors at her job, claiming I was abusive and unstable, trying to turn her friends and family against me. I heard from a few people she'd already called, crying and begging for support, making herself out to be the victim again. It made me sick. I knew she was desperate, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to stay calm, present my case clearly, and let the facts speak for themselves. Meanwhile, I discovered that she'd been secretly trying to move some of our assets, more than just the money transfer. She'd been talking to a shady real estate agent, trying to get a quick sale on the house. I found out she'd already contacted the bank about refinancing, so she could pull out even more cash once she had the court's approval. She was planning to leave town with the kids, the money, and Mark, just like that. I couldn't believe how far she'd gone, how much she'd betrayed me and everything we built. I confronted her again one evening. I told her I knew about her plans to run, to take everything and disappear. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I wasn't going to let her do that, not without a fight. She looked furious, her usual bitchy smirk replaced with a sneer. "You think you can stop me, Tommy? You're just a weak little man who's afraid of losing his precious house and savings. I'll get what I want one way or another." I felt a cold wave of rage. I told her she was a liar, a manipulator, and a thief, that I had all the proof I needed and I was going to fight her in court, that I'd make sure she paid for her lies, her betrayal, and her greed. It was the first time I truly felt like I was standing up for myself, not just reacting to her schemes. I told her she could try to run, but it wouldn't change the facts. The truth was on my side. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, the stolen money, her lies, her sneaky plans. I wondered how I'd let it get so bad, how I'd missed the signs for so long. I felt stupid, naive, and devastated. But at the same time, I was determined. I knew I had to be strong for myself, for my kids, and for the future I still hoped to build. I had to put an end to her lies and manipulations, to stop her from taking everything I cared about. The next day, I filed the court papers, an emergency motion to freeze her accounts, prevent her from selling the house, and stop her from taking any more of our money. I also requested a temporary restraining order, just to keep her from contacting me or the kids until the court could decide. I knew she'd fight back hard, but I was ready. I had the evidence, I had a plan, and I wasn't going to let her win. While I waited for the court hearing, I started to feel a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Relief, because I finally took control of the situation. Anxiety, because I knew Lisa wouldn't go down without a fight. I also started thinking about what I really wanted. Was I fighting just to protect my money and house, or was I fighting to reclaim my dignity? Honestly, I think it was both. I'd spent years trusting her blindly, and now I had to rebuild from the ground up. The hearing was set for a week later. I remember sitting there, staring at the courtroom door, feeling like I was about to step into a battle I didn't fully understand. But I knew one thing: I was done being the victim. Whatever happened next, I was going to stand my ground and fight for what was mine. I didn't care how much she tried to spin her lies or how many legal tricks she pulled. I had the truth, and I was ready to use it to make her pay. The week leading up to the court hearing felt like an endless cycle of anxiety and anticipation. Every morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach, wondering if Lisa would escalate her tactics or try to pull some stunt to sway the court in her favor. She was already spreading rumors about me, trying to paint herself as the innocent victim who was just trying to save her marriage from my supposed madness. It was infuriating. I knew her game. She'd do anything to keep what she thought was hers, including lying, manipulating, and even playing the victim. I spent those days meticulously reviewing all my evidence: bank statements, texts, emails, the reports from the private investigator. I wanted to be completely prepared, knowing Lisa's lawyers would try to discredit me or spin the story to make her look like the wronged wife. I wasn't naive enough to think she'd give up easily. She was used to getting her way, and I was pretty sure she'd come into that courtroom with a plan to do just that. On the day of the hearing, I felt a mixture of dread and resolve. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit, trying to appear calm but feeling like my insides were a mess. When Lisa showed up, she was her usual bitchy self, smirking, eye-rolling, acting like she was already the winner. She knew what she was doing. She hired a lawyer who was aggressive, confident, and ready to throw everything she had at me. The courtroom was packed: her family, friends, her lawyer, my lawyer, and a few court officials. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. First, my lawyer presented the evidence, proof of the illegal transfers, the messages from Lisa to Mark, the private investigator's reports. We argued that Lisa had been planning her escape for months, using the money to fund her affair and her attempt to claim the house and savings unfairly. Lisa's lawyer tried to spin it differently, claimed I was paranoid, that the transfers were legitimate investments, and that Lisa had every right to claim the house since she was the primary caregiver and deserved a fair settlement. She even tried to paint me as controlling and unstable just to weaken my case. But I stayed firm, sticking to the facts, showing how Lisa had been manipulating the situation from the start. When it was Lisa's turn to speak, she sat there with that bitchy smirk, trying to act innocent. She claimed she was trying to better herself, that she'd only been working with Mark to start a business, and that the money transfers were just part of her savings plan. She the affair outright, claiming I was just jealous and insecure, trying to ruin her reputation. I felt my blood boil. Her lies were so transparent, so desperate, I almost wanted to laugh. But then my lawyer brought out the real evidence, proof of the affair, the secret messages, the financial trail that proved she'd been planning her escape for months. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, looking at all the evidence. I could see the wheels turning in her mind. The judge wasn't buying Lisa's lies as easily as she thought. It was clear from the way she was questioning Lisa that the court saw through her manipulations. In the end, the judge granted my motion to freeze her accounts, prevent her from selling the house, and issued the temporary restraining order. It was a small victory, but it felt huge at the time. I felt a wave of relief, knowing I'd stopped her from doing any more damage, at least for now. But I also knew this was just the beginning of a long battle. As I left the courtroom, Lisa stormed past me, her face twisted in anger. She yelled some insults, calling me a paranoid psycho, but I didn't bother to respond. I'd heard enough of her lies. I knew she'd try to fight dirty, but I was ready. I had the evidence, I had the law on my side, and I was determined to see this through to the end. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, feeling exhausted but strangely lighter. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. I realized how much I'd been blind to her manipulations, how deeply she'd betrayed me, but also how strong I could be when I finally faced the truth. I knew she'd come back swinging, trying to spin her version of events, but I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. I was done being the victim. Now I was fighting back hard. The court's ruling was a turning point, but I knew Lisa wouldn't go quietly. Sure enough, she doubled down on her manipulations. She started calling me, sending fake apologies, claiming she was sorry for everything, and begging me to drop the case. Her tears were fake, her words rehearsed. I could see through her now, her desperation, her need to save what she thought was her empire, her lies to cover up her tracks, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. I'd learned the hard way that her version of truth was just another lie. Over the next few weeks, I kept my distance. I focused on the legal process, working with my lawyer to prepare for the next phase, fighting her claim to the house and the rest of our savings. I also started rebuilding my life, slowly, piece by piece. I got a new job, started going to therapy to deal with the emotional fallout, and made plans to move into a place of my own. The betrayal had knocked me down, but I was determined to stand back up. Lisa, on the other hand, kept trying to manipulate the situation. She hired her own lawyer, tried to argue that I was harassing her, and claimed she was the real victim. She even filed her own counterclaim, insisting she deserved half of everything because she'd sacrificed so much for our marriage. But I had the evidence, and I wasn't about to let her spin her lies into victory. I knew the truth, and I knew what she'd been up to. One day I received a message from her, more desperate than ever. She accused me of ruining her life, begged me to just let it go, and promised she'd never do anything to hurt me again. I read it, then deleted it. I realized I couldn't trust her, not anymore. All her apologies, all her tears, they were just words to try and manipulate me into dropping the case. I knew better now. Eventually, the court scheduled a final hearing. I prepared my case carefully, making sure every piece of evidence was in place. I knew Lisa would fight to the bitter end, but I was ready. I had the truth on my side, and I was determined to get justice, not just for the money or the house, but for myself. I wanted to walk away from this mess knowing I'd done everything I could to protect what was mine. The day of the final hearing was intense. Lisa's lawyer tried all sorts of tactics, questioning my motives, casting doubt on my evidence, trying to paint Lisa as the wronged wife. But I stayed calm, sticking to the facts. I told the court about her lies, her affair, the secret transfers, and her attempts to run away with everything. I explained how she had manipulated our entire life together for her own benefit. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. She awarded me full custody of the house, ordered Lisa to pay back the stolen money, and set clear boundaries on her access to our savings. She also warned Lisa that any further attempts to hide assets or manipulate the court could result in legal penalties. The relief I felt was overwhelming. I finally had closure, justice for the betrayal, for the lies, and for the years I wasted trusting someone who never deserved it. Looking back, I see how much I've grown from this nightmare. I learned that sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can start rebuilding. I learned that lies can be exposed, no matter how deep they're buried. And most of all, I learned that standing up for yourself, even when it feels impossible, is the most powerful thing you can do. Now I'm focusing on myself, on healing, and on moving forward. I still have scars, sure, but I also have strength I never knew I possessed. That experience has changed me forever, but it's also made me more cautious, more aware. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Don't ignore the signs, trust your instincts, and never let anyone steal your peace or your future. Because in the end, the truth might hurt, but it's also the only way to truly set yourself free.